Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Great, how are you?
Fab. Oh, it's 31 degrees today here.
Stop it.
Changed here. It was 31. It's come down to about 20 now. Yeah.
Brilliant. Shorts and
actually quite
t-shirt.
cold
Happy
over
days.
Oh, that's
Is it?
nice.
Oh, show off.
Yeah. Well, it was quite iffy last week. And then we had a cold front come through on Sunday afternoon that was like heavy rain, really cold. And then yesterday and today have been really cold still. But it's like I've looked at the forecast and they keep saying that basically after today it starts to get warmer. And then after that it will be very nice for some prolonged period. So
I misunderstood what you meant. I thought you said that's cold here, as in 31's cold here.
Oh, no,
And
it's genuinely cold here.
Right.
No. It's
So
not
I was like,
nice
show off. But no,
It's
I'm
quite-
really happy with the
quite
weather.
cool.
It's been beautiful. It's a precursor to summer. It's been gorgeous. Anyway, any news from anyone?
Negative. No.
Big fat nothing, I think.
All right. Well, we may as well just crack on. I suppose I should introduce us. Well, at least myself. I'm Schmidty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial by
Wine.
Wine.
And what are we drinking?
I'm top shelf today. I'm
Same
still
here.
getting through the San Pellegrino.
Hey, did you win Lotto?
Well, you'd think so. I know I bought like a case of it or whatever, but I did have to go to the back fridge because I've worked through the front fridge, there's a middle fridge, and there's the garage fridge, and now that was the last one I could see, so I don't know what else I've got left.
Wow, you've been...
I better savor it.
Do you get to like the third last bottle and say reorder more on it or something so that you don't run out?
I should do, but no. I'm a bit
Should we
embarrassed
go
to say
back
that I got...
to Woolworths.
Yeah, I'll be back to
soda water
Woolworths Woolly soda. Absolutely. I'll probably be back on that by the next episode.
soon.
What about you guys?
Well, we are in the middle of an alcohol-free week, so we're not having alcohol we didn't have like alcohol Sunday, Monday, today's Tuesday, Wednesday, we thought Thursday we'd have some. So we're having a Tinto di Verano, which is a red wine spritzer, so it does have alcohol in it. Yeah, but it's only low alcohol. It's not like we're having a bottle of wine.
Is that a standard drink each?
1.5,
It's still
I feel
high,
like that's
yeah.
okay.
That's all right. Yeah.
Sorry, your alcohol-free week goes till... Is it
Today.
Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday?
Thursday.
Crash.
Well, yeah, today's Tuesday, so...
It's a alcohol-free Monday. Is what
It is.
I'm hearing. Yeah.
Oh, no, and a Sunday. You didn't drink on Sunday.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Mondays
No.
are long. They could feel like a week. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think because, it's only 1.5 standard drinks instead of 4, that's like a reduction.
True.
It's almost
True.
negative alcohol.
Oh,
Yeah.
please. I
Put a
hope we're
piece
not...
of celery in it and it'll be negative. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, similar to you, I am on a tin, and it's not a wine. I lashed out and got myself another case of hard-rated alcoholic lemon lime 0 sugars from my friends at Asahi. These are one standard drink. And I bought a case of mango chutneys, but mango chutneys have changed.
What?
What do you mean?
They're canned now. They're not bottling them anymore.
Oh, why?
Doesn't bother me. No idea, but I did
It's going to
know
bother someone.
because of my mate who worked there. She did tell me about 4 months ago. Firstly, she said that they were getting rid of the 0 sugar mango chutney, and I nearly wrote a nasty letter to the chairman of Asahi. Then she said, no, they're not. They're just changing out of bottles. And I was like, I can live with that. And they take up less space in your fridge, but they're the same amount, so the same volume. So I'm all right with that. But today I thought I'd go for the citrus joy that is the alcoholic lemon lime. So I've got a story for us. Would you like to hear it?
I do want to hear it.
Yes, please.
Yes.
And-
Pretty grim stuff. I was talking to a friend today and I was talking about various things, and I said something about, I can't remember, might have been the Israel Keys story, Swanee. And she goes,
Yeah.
that's Swanee. She's always, really getting the really dark ones, isn't she? I was like, I don't know. I think we take turns. I said, but she's very interested in the psychological thriller type element of some of the stories. The nut
Yeah,
punch,
the nut punch.
So I shall tell you a story. Right, I came across this story the other day, and I think it was one of those where, you know, when you go on a page and you're reading something, and then down the bottom it says, you may also be interested. And
yeah.
I clicked on that, and for once it wasn't actually something that I wasn't interested in. So I did a bit more digging on it, and my sources are Wikipedia, All That's Interesting, Medium.com, Vocal Media, Syracuse.com, CrimeLibrary.org, which had a piece written by Mark Gardo, and a bit from the criminalmindsfandom.com wiki, which was a bit unusual as I've never even watched Criminal Minds. And I can only assume they use this story as a plotline inspiration.
You've never watched Criminal Minds?
Nah.
Oh, what?
Also, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this story also was an inspiration for a Law and Order episode.
SUV.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there another kind?
SVU, sorry.
SVU. This is definitely
SUV. I was like, that's not come out quite right. What have I said?
Law and Order in a four-wheel drive.
SUV. Yeah.
But
there is a car in this story, but it's not necessarily
another genre entirely. Yeah.
Okay. So in October 1988, so let's pop into the timey-wimey machine and go back to the late 80s, a 14-year-old girl named Kirsten, and I'm not actually sure if that's her real name, but that's what we're going with.
Never hear that name anymore. I used to know quite a few of them when I did ballet.
Kirsten
and Kristens,
Yeah, I always get them confused.
And it's one of those names I'd always hesitate, Kirsten and Kristen. But yeah. Because I knew so many of both of them.
She was hanging out with friends and
where?
Drinking. I'll get to where we are. Well, I'll tell you now. Oh, fine. We're in Syracuse, New York, right?
Oh, okay.
And she's hanging out with some mates and probably doing some drinking and maybe a few drugs or whatever. And she decides she's going to go to another friend's house, and she starts looking for a ride. And this older man pulls up and says, do you want a ride?
What a great idea, Kirsten.
I know. So, but look, it was pretty common in, like, we're talking late 80s. And as much as there are so many horror stories about people who hitchhike, remember the Mary, I think her name was the woman whose arms got cut off? Mary Vincent. There are some horrendous stories and lots of murders and whatever, but there are also, I think at the period of time, there were lots of people who hitchhiked without any difficulty either. Although I must admit, I don't see as many people with a thumb out these days.
Oh, God, no.
I used to see it you'd see it quite regularly, but nowadays not so much.
Do you ever, when you do see them though, do you go, as if, mate?
100%, especially a single female driving down the road.
Oh, let me.
Oh, you need some help? I'll give you a ride. So Kirsten unfortunately does accept the ride, and of course he didn't take her to where she wanted to go. Now, we don't know how he incapacitated her because she didn't have any memory of it, but it'll come out a bit later, I think.
Well, that's better than she didn't survive. That's where I thought that was going to go.
Well, we'll see.
Oh.
But she didn't know where she was when she woke up. But she did wake up in a pitch black, very cold place, and she was naked.
Oh.
And her captor then raped her.
Oh.
So who was this captor? John Thomas, and that is very ironic, Jamelske, was born in 1935 and was raised in the DeWitt area, which is a suburb of Syracuse, New York. He was, like others we've covered, a quiet guy at school, wasn't into sports or academia, though he did go to college and graduated from a state university as his father encouraged him to keep going. Regardless of his uni degree, he didn't have a particularly amazing career. He worked at local grocery stores for cash and later as a handyman and carpenter. He was also a total tight ass by all accounts.
Relevance, Your Honour.
It becomes relevant. Don't worry.
Just for humour. Oh, okay, yeah.
No, it becomes relevant. Yeah.
I would have allowed it just for humour value. Just saying.
Always a tight ass. He married Dorothy Richmond in 1953, and he had 3 boys with her. But he seemed pretty well known for being so tight he wouldn't shout if a shark bit him.
Couldn't drag a pin through his ass with a tractor.
That's right. Yeah. He was also a bit of a hoarder.
Oh.
And he would cruise around the streets in his tan 1975 Ford Mercury Comet, picking up empty bottles and cans, which he redeemed for the deposit money.
Thrifty.
Like constantly. every night. He'd be looking for cans and bottles.
Was
he'd
he
be picking
though, or
'em
was
up.
that just a
Probably a
cover?
little bit
he
of money
was.
to
No,
make,
he was.
actually. Yeah.
He was. And he was a hoarder. Trust
There's a
me. He had
recycler
a lot of
before.
bottles. And his favourite haunt was the recycling place. That's right.
He wasn't
go.
looking for victims at the same time.
No, not at this point. Now, the thing about his doing that is, like, I did that too in the 80s, but that's when 10 cents could buy you something.
Yeah, that's true.
Nowadays, they still only give you 10 cents per can or bottle. And I don't know
I'm looking
who's
at it
making
right
money
now.
out of that. Yeah, 10 cents. I'm like, seriously, allow for inflation, people. Surely 50
Yeah.
cents. Because 10 cents used to buy you a bag of lollies or 20
Oh,
cents.
yeah,
What
at least.
happened to the
yeah.
cost of living crisis for
I know, right?
recycling?
If you want people to recycle, you need to up your ante.
I cannot continue my mortgage repayments on my bottle collecting wage.
No, honestly. The funny thing is, though, that John wasn't actually skint. He'd convinced his father earlier on than this to invest in stocks. And by the time his parents died, he actually got a pretty sizable inheritance as he was their only child. However, he went around town looking like a bit of a bagman, getting the bottles and the cans, was, moderately dishevelled, not well dressed in his 1975 Ford Mercury. And, this is 1988, so he's got an older vehicle. And people sort of thought of him as a bit of a, I suppose, what would you call it? It wasn't homeless, but, they thought of him as a bit of a tramp, I guess, in some ways, or just that kind of sort of strange hobo-y man.
Bit of a bum.
Although he did a bit of a bum, but he did have a house and everything.
House, yeah, I know. Not homeless, but just a bit sort of like.
But he certainly didn't look like someone who had a property portfolio, but he did.
No.
Yeah, and he had investment property, and he sold off some of the land behind his house. But if you were in his household, you would have thought they were a poor family who loved to hoard stuff. They had shit everywhere, and when their neighbours complained, like everywhere, all over the, standard junkyard type house,
Yes.
And so when the neighbours complained about it, instead of getting rid of some of the junk and mowing the lawn, he put up a 6-foot fence all the way around the property rather than clean up the shithole. Yeah. Now, maybe because she was living in a hoarder house and married to Ebenezer Scrooge, Dorothy, sadly, developed cancer in 1988.
I think there's no direct links between that and cancer, but I'm with you.
Stress.
That's enough for me.
Stress. It was after this that John decided he couldn't live without a sex life and his wife was too sick. So the best thing to do would be to take a woman or girl from the streets and keep her as his sex slave whilst trying to improve her life.
That's a great idea, I think, to make that leap straight up. Yeah, good on him.
There's really no other real option, is there?
No, you wouldn't. I can't think of what else you'd do. I'd be hard pressed.
Yeah. You've nailed it. You've nailed it, Swanee. That's it.
I like it. Sounds perfectly reasonable.
Yes. So poor old Kirsten, of course, was his first victim.
Did you run this by Dorothy, by the way?
No. We don't believe Dorothy was aware of his proclivities. No.
Oh, right. Okay.
She was too busy worrying about the fact that she was facing her mortality, I would guess, yes. And, what would become, but the boys were grown up at this point, I think. The 3 boys, they were a bit older. 2 of them had moved away, and I think one was at college or something. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he was out cruising in his car one night, picking up bottles and cans and stuff, and he picked up Kirsten. He took her to his mother's house, and the place that she woke up when she was all cold and in the dark and naked turned out to be a well that was next to the house.
Oh.
So he threw her in a well.
Oh, ow. How deep is that?
Well, it was deep enough she couldn't get out, but I don't really understand.
But not like super deep. Okay.
Well, no.
She'd die if you got thrown down, yeah.
Yeah. And so I assume it's a bit like the James Gum hole in the basement or wherever or not, in Silence of the Lambs, wherever or not that fictional character who was not inspired by this one, but whoever that was, it's the same sort of thing where you see the woman, she can't get out. It's a shitty place. Anyway, he was able to get her out though. And I believe that he had her chained. So I don't know whether or not he used the chain. I don't know how any of this worked, right? So Kirsten's family did report her missing, but unfortunately she had been known to leave on occasion, as in run away from home or, stop out. So normally she would go to her friends. And the friends had said to the parents, no, she's not with us. So they reported to the police, and of course the police assumed she was a runaway.
Mm-hmm.
And to make matters worse, over a period of time, which we'll get to, John had her write letters and send audio tapes. And I don't think she made phone calls, but there were various contacts made through the family to say that she was fine and that she'd be coming home soon.
I'm great. I'm just living in a well. As a
No,
sex
obviously
slave.
she didn't say that. Obviously she didn't.
She wasn't allowed. Okay.
I think he may have controlled the narrative.
The narrative.
As they would say in this day and age, yes. Now, I don't really understand how she survived being in a well for what was at least 6 months. But eventually he realised that getting her out of the well each day so that he could rape her was a bit risky.
Wow.
And, I could say sexually assault her. But I don't know why, but I feel like sexually assault is
Light,
yeah.
I know.
So I want to make the
Let's
point.
say what it is. Make it graphic. It is what it is. Yeah.
I want to make
And
the
raping
point.
her.
He raped her.
Yep.
Every day. And apparently he was big on Viagra, and he had a lot of prescriptions in it. So he'd pop a Viagra. He would have, at this point, I think he was in his 60s. So 88, he was, what did I say? He was born 35. What would that make him? 53 and 88. For whatever reason, at 53, he needed to have some help. So he's down there and he's raping her all the time. But he was taking her out of the well to do this. Maybe there wasn't enough space or something. And he realised also that his mother was still living in the house. Apparently, she had no idea that he had a girl in the well. I'm assuming the mum was pretty old, perhaps infirm, whatever, to have not noticed the girl in the well, because I'm sure she would have been screaming. I don't think it was right on the house. I think it was set back a bit, but either way. So he decided to do a bit of a reno at his own house.
Oh.
Yeah, so he had some of the backyard dug out, and he built a 2-room bunker in the backyard, sort of adjacent to the house, which could be accessed from the garage. Obviously, bunker being underground. There was no electricity, running water, or a toilet in the bunker, and the only air came from a pipe that led up through the house. Now, no one seemed too concerned or interested when he brought all these backhoes and diggers and construction workers in and poured all this concrete to build a bunker. Because
what you doing, Dad? No.
Apparently, he told them he was building a bomb shelter.
Prep. Oh, there you go.
Bomb shelter in 1988. Were we still worried about the Cold War in 1988?
Yes.
We might have been. Yeah.
Getting to be less so, but yeah, you could still lead into a little bit of scared of nuclear war kind of thing.
And when did the first Desert Storm happen? America's at war with various people.
1990.
There you go. It's a bomb shelter, apparently. And by this point, I doubt anyone would have put that past him, because he was a bit of an odd job around the neighbourhood. By the summer of 1989, so let's remember that he picked her up in, what did I say? He picked her up
88?
Definitely 88. Picked her up in October 1988. So by the summer of
It'd be pretty bloody cold in New York in that point to stay
in a well
outside. She'd be frozen. You just die, wouldn't you?
Well, she didn't somehow. Yes.
Oh, God.
She said she was always in there until he took her from there and he put her in this bunker. In 1988, he finishes the digs and he moves Kirsten into them. So in this wonderful place, and I'm not sure this all happened at once, but he had a bath which was filled via a garden hose, so cold water, of course.
Oh.
A bucket for going to the toilet in.
I love it. That's the thing so far that's really got me upset.
Yeah, rude.
Oh, a bath with a garden hose.
Cold water.
Bath.
Is it summer
animals?
yet?
No.
This is summer, yes, but
okay.
It's underground. So she's in an underground bunker that has no electricity. I think I read something about maybe pumping some heat from the house in. So that's the only sort of heating it had. Had no running water, had no toilet, drainage, nothing. So it's like mum and dad's cellar, basically.
Has it got wine?
No, it doesn't even have wine, right? So it's terrible.
That is hell.
So yes, this is the bit that upset me more, was that he also had like a foam mattress on the floor. And the thing is, though, as I said, no drainage. So when you emptied the bath, the whole floor got wet. So everything got really mouldy and gross as well.
Would you rather sleep on the floor or a dirty foam mattress?
A dirty foam mattress, though, if the floor is mouldy and I don't really want to be in that situation at all. But
mattress is. Ugh.
I don't know. I'll try and hang it up. Everything's going to be mouldy. You're going to be mouldy, right, in this situation. Also, there were steel doors.
I hadn't thought of that.
They were what? Steel what, sorry?
Steel doors. So when you go in via the garage, I think it's in the back wall, there's a very small space and you crawl through it to get, and you sort of go in a little tunnel to go down to another set of steel doors, which were lockable from either side. So whenever her rapist, John, would go into the bunker, he would lock himself in there with her. And I think also she was chained she had a chain around the ankle, and I think she was chained up a lot of the time. John would make her record when she brushed her teeth and when she bathed, which was I read about every 2 weeks or so he let her have a bath, and also when he raped her, which was by all accounts, as I said, daily. He only gave her food once a day. He gave her water and crackers for a long time. And then he fed her eventually, but it was very much the James Gum type feeling. Except with a lot of rape in there.
Yeah.
So as he only fed her once a day, I'm going to hazard a guess that he scheduled a visit to her around his work and family commitments. He also showed her pictures of her own family and her home and told her that he would kill her brother and family if she didn't comply with him. When he was in the bunker with her, as I said, he'd locked himself in. So she knew that if she ever hit him or tried to kill him or anything like that, if anything happened to him when he was in there, it was a combination padlock, she'd be locked in there and die. Yeah. So there was no kind of point trying to incapacitate him in any way because he was the way to get out. And Kirsten, remember she was already in a well for 6 months, was in that bunker for 2 years.
Bloody hell.
So for some reason, not really sure why, John decided toward the end of 1990 that it was time that Kirsten left. So what do you think he did? Well, if you thought he killed her, cut up her body and dissolved it in acid, you would be wrong. That's another story.
Yeah, I didn't think that.
Right. That's another story. That's several other stories. Now, he blindfolded her and then got his son to drive him and the blindfolded girl to the airport.
Who's his son?
Uh-huh. And then he took the blindfold off and flew with her to Lake Tahoe, Nevada.
What?
The son was told that he was taking this girl to the airport as a surprise. So the blindfold was because I'm taking her on a surprise trip. She doesn't know about it. So that's why she's blindfolded. I'm guessing she was so terrified. And at this point, you're finally being taken out of that space. You're probably thinking, he's going to kill me now. This is it. And you would have been spending 2.5 years thinking, this is going to happen. This is going to, I'm never coming out of here alive. Apparently the family sort of knew that he had some action on the side, but no one knew he was keeping a girl in an underground bunker. And as I said, the sons weren't actually in the house all the time. In fact, I don't think they were in the house at all at this point. And the mum is upstairs dying of cancer. So he told his son that Kirsten's parents, this kills me, had asked him to keep her at his house because she had a weight issue and he was going to help her slim down. And there's a shame gum again,
Oh,
it puts the lotion on its skin.
Yeah.
So they have a lovely week in Nevada where they tour around and they even went to a casino, which, given that John's an absolute tight ass, that's quite surprising. And, what else would you do if you're in Nevada? Then he strangled her and left her in the desert.
Are you serious?
Oh.
No, of course he didn't. No, of course he didn't. He's not a madman. No, he gave her a ticket for a flight to New York and sent her home on her own. So she went back to her family. They all accepted that she'd been a runaway and she didn't report the crime.
What?
Well, I'm going to hazard a guess she was extremely traumatized and didn't even know where to begin to explain this and who would believe her anyway. And remember, she's 17 and she's just spent nearly 3 years in a bunker with a nutter. How do you explain that? And the fact he let her go too. And that will make more sense, or that will play out a bit later.
I'm still shocked.
Also, I read, and I don't know if it's true of her, but he kept tabs on the women. And that's right, there are more that he took. So it's possible. And also remember, he had this threat for 3 years that he was going to kill her family. He talked to all of them about being part of like a sex trafficking syndicate or part of the CIA, and the police were involved. So if you go to the police, they're never going to believe you because the higher ups are all in this ring with me, etc. So this 3 years of this, right? 3 years of being told you're nothing, you're my property, you're lucky I haven't sold you on
or killed you,
and all these, these people out there. No one's going to help you. No one's going to believe you. I'm
you're lucky
powerful.
You've got me. Yeah.
and absolute, gaslighting and brainwashing, etc. So when you think about it in that way, you can understand why she just wanted to get on with her
Yep.
life. So that's end of 1990, right? So
Yep.
she's out, she's gone home. John goes back to cruising in his Mercury Comet, picking up bottles and cans. And at the end of March 1995, he picked up another find. Not far from where he took Kirsten, John spotted a young girl walking on her own. He stopped and chatted. I think she was 14 as well. He stopped and chatted with her and convinced her to deliver a package for him, for money, obviously. And so she gets in the car, and of course, as it turns out, she was the package.
Mm.
So we're going to call victim number 2 Michelle. I don't think I'm using any of their real names, except maybe one. So he takes Michelle to his house, and into the dungeon she goes, chained to the floor.
So
he
the
drugged-
same dungeon that he'd used for Kirsten.
Same,
Okay.
same bunker in the house, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it worked. It was great. He had the other girl there for 2.5 years.
I wasn't expecting that he was building another one. I didn't really mean that, but I was just clarifying that Kirsten had come prior. Yeah.
No, and don't worry, I don't think he's done any modifications to it since
No, more
Kirsten left.
renos.
I don't think he's even cleaned it since she left.
Oh, I'm
So
sure.
it's still repulsive. And the mattress is the same mattress, the bath's the same bath, the bucket's probably the same bucket. So he takes Michelle into the dungeon, chains her to the floor, drugs her, and when she wakes up, she's naked and chained. Now, she was a fighter, and she didn't respond terribly well to him, and she had a good go at hitting him and being pretty spicy, but it didn't stop him from raping her daily and taking photos of her and telling her that he was involved in a sex slave ring where he sold women and girls to overseas buyers. As with Kirsten, he showed her photos of her home and family, and she was absolutely terrified, as she would be. Michelle's family reported her missing, and again the authorities assumed she was a runaway. They did investigate. In fairness, they investigated a bit, but with no leads whatsoever. They were just like, oh, teenage runaway. And she had a history with drugs and minor crime, and with no leads, their case went cold.
They probably would have said this happens all the time. Here's an example
Another
from a few
statistic.
years ago where this
Last week.
same thing happened.
Her and all the other kids who,
Yeah.
you're right, go missing, whatever. So, ugh. Anyway, 2 years later, he must have tired of Michelle because one day in 1997, Michelle rang her mum and said she was coming home. John very kindly dropped her off at her mum's house.
What?
Now, she did tell her family what happened to her, and they wanted to report him immediately, but she was so convinced that John would kill her and others that she didn't want to do it. Also, she didn't actually know who he was or where he lived. Now, John did seem to keep tabs on his victims, as I said, and Michelle's family noted a man who she identified at some point, that's the man who abducted me,
Oh, God.
driving past her house quite regularly and staring at her. But again, she didn't report it. Probably because he knows where, like, how terrified would you be? He knows where I am. He could take me again. He's out there. I mean, it's beyond creepy. It's stuff of nightmare.
It really is.
John is now getting pretty good at this kidnapping and raping malarkey. And in August 1997, he picked up a woman who was walking on her own. And she didn't quite fit the same profile as the first two ladies. She was a Vietnamese lady who was 52 at the time. So she's a bit older than the 14-year-olds he's been going for.
I don't know. I'm sure she's still got it.
That's right. I mean, I know.
You know,
we have.
you know.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I'm sure.
She was young at heart.
Just as palatable. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Sexy as. Probably not an appropriate sort of way of thinking about it, given what happens.
No.
I read a couple of versions of her name, and I think they were all pseudonyms. So I'm going with Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it's the most common female Vietnamese name I could find. So he picks up Lynn, giving her a sob story that he has no friends, which is probably true. And she felt sorry for him. I guess she felt sorry for him or something. So she gets in the car, and also
I've got no friends. Oh, okay.
Oh no, they chatted for a bit, and he's like, I've got no friends. I just go around getting bottles and cans, and
After I locked him up for years and raped him every day, they don't want to be my friend anymore.
they don't like me. That's right. Yeah. He's also 62 at this point. So I'm guessing, and she's 52, right? So she probably doesn't feel like he's that much of a
As
threat.
threatened,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he drives them around for hours, which frankly surprised me, given he's such a tight ass, the amount of petrol he wastes in that gas-guzzling car of his. But anyway, then he gets her home and he locks her up in the dungeon. Now, her boyfriend reported her missing a few days later, but again, there were no leads as to where she was or could have gone. And there's no footage of her getting into the vehicle. There's nothing. She just sort of disappears. And the bunker drill was pretty much the same with Lynn. Daily visits, and I'm going to guess about 30 minutes after he's taken his little blue pills. And he really liked Lynn's singing voice. He thought she had a lovely voice, and he even rigged a TV up for her.
Oh.
But he didn't like it when she cried, and he hit her so hard once that she had a ruptured eardrum from the blow, and she's still deaf in that ear today.
Oh.
She cooperated totally for him and tried to get him to like her so that he would let her go. She said, I did everything he asked, hoping he would release me. I didn't want to die down there in those rooms because no one would ever find my body and my soul would remain in a cold place. And weirdly, and not one to let one of his victims sleep easy, he put a life-size human skeleton next to her sleeping mat.
What?
What a prick, right? What is that about?
Oh,
it's just for what? In this horrible, dark, horrendous place.
Just a bit of company.
Wilson. I don't think that film, what's it called?
Castaway.
Castaway. I don't think that was made at that point. So she didn't think to treat the skeleton. It was plastic, by the way. It wasn't a real.
Oh, I thought it was the real one. I was going to say
No, it was plastic, but it was, yeah, right. No, it was plastic. But I mean, what a dick. On May 23, 1998, he blindfolded Lynn and drove her to the bus station and dropped her off with some cash. She went straight to the police, but unfortunately they didn't believe her. Mostly because if she'd been abducted and imprisoned for 9 months, which she had been, the policeman said something like along the lines of, you don't get out of that alive. So you're coming in here. Like they just were convinced that it was,
wow,
she was making it up. And whilst that may be statistically valid, guys, don't ignore someone who's telling you something like this and has no history of previous truth stretching.
Good point.
But apparently John had a completely different view of his relationship with Lynn.
Is wolf crying the same as truth stretching?
No.
Because
truth stretching is lying. Wolf crying is
because she could be wolf crying.
Exaggerating.
Wolf crying's making it up completely, isn't it? If you say wolf and there's no wolf to get attention.
Oh, yeah, but it's more about.
I'm just wondering whether she's a wolf crier.
Well, I think they were accusing her of being a wolf crier. The policemen were accusing her of being a wolf crier. Yep. John, on the other hand, had a completely different view of the relationship that they had, and he thought they had a really strong connection. He was later quoted as saying, it's not on this planet, right? Later quoted as saying, probably if we'd met on the outside, not in your dungeon, she would have dumped whoever she was with immediately, he said. I think she would look at it as a positive thing. I do.
She must have been a good actress.
Met on the outside. She wasn't in there and you walked in and met her. You took her off the street and you abducted her and you kidnapped her and you put her in there.
Perhaps you did meet on the outside, and had you not done all the shitty things you did, she might have liked you, you fucking idiot.
The other thing about that's interesting, I did read this, is that he did not see any of this as kidnapping because his definition of kidnapping was where you try and ransom someone. So he didn't see this as kidnapping.
Did he see it as rape?
No, I don't think so. We'll get on to his view of things.
Good friends. We're just fuck buddies.
She's my sex slave. It's all right. So whilst Dorothy was diagnosed with cancer in 1988, she seriously must have struggled with that for some time because she eventually succumbed to the disease in 1999. So she lived another 11 years.
Oh, God.
As I said, I think she was mostly in an upstairs bedroom in the house proper. I read somewhere that while she might have known he had women friends in that period, there was nothing that indicated she knew about the bunker gang. So after his wife's death, he respectfully waits a year or so. And in 2001, he's decided it's time for another victim. So he heads out again in his shitty Mercury Comet and he sees a 26-year-old.
How old's this Comet now? 75?
It's still 75.
26, yeah.
And the thing is, he'd be so easy to find if his car was so noticeable. Do you know what I mean? It's not like everyone knows he's the old guy who collects cans
bloke in
or
the
whatever.
Mercury.
Yeah.
Stay away from him because he'll abduct you.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is about the car is that I keep saying it's 1975. I think it was a 1974. That makes sense in a minute. I changed this 3 times because I read 3 different sources. It becomes relevant in a second. It's one or the other. So anyways, it is shitty Mercury Comet nonetheless. And he sees a 26-year-old woman who was a waitress at the local, it's like Outback Steakhouse or something, or something like that. And she's also a mother of 2. And she's walking down the road in a not very good area, going away from work. And there's some guys hanging around behind her and they're, making lewd comments or something. And she's a bit spooked by that. And she had been out, I believe she'd been out drinking and she might have been on some drugs as well, just partying a bit. But she was put off by these guys behind her. So when our old mate comes along in his shitty Mercury Comet and offers her a ride.
Here's my night in, what was the name of it? In tan armour.
Yeah, exactly. And so she says, oh, yeah, excellent, thanks, and jumps straight out of the frying pan into the fire. She actually calls herself Jennifer, and it might actually be her name. Like the others, she was taken back to his place. Now, I heard in an interview she gave that she said that he knocked her out with chloroform, which makes sense of the others because the others didn't seem to have any memory of how they got from the car to the dungeon. Or in Kirsten's case, the car to the well. And Kirsten, bless her, has very little memory of a lot of it. I think she's blocked a lot of it out because it's so traumatic. So she remembers this, put something over her mouth. She's knocked out. She ends up, again, like the others, waking up and naked and freezing on a 3-inch foam mattress in this stinky dungeon. And like the others, she was allowed to bathe once every couple of weeks and she had to go to the toilet in a bucket and she was raped daily. Now, she was... Oh, yeah. Sorry, with the Vietnamese lady, just on the food thing, I talked about Kirsten Anna getting, not cheese, she's got crackers and water for a bit. And I don't know whether or not Kirsten was a bit on the heavy side because he made that comment about her needing to lose weight. And so whether or not the crackers thing was, him literally being like James Gum and trying to starve her down a bit. But this woman said she could order anything she liked. So he would get her any food that she wanted for this one, but only once a day. I'm assuming it's now, what I say was 2001?
That sounds awesome.
Uber
It's probably
Eats.
got better takeout services. Yeah. So I'm just thinking that the area around him's probably built up.
You wouldn't want to
with
be where
small
I live.
takeaway.
We're always complaining about our limited options. Surely there'd be somewhere better in America near like a strip mall that has
where we
loads.
live.
Yeah, that would not be a great offer.
Roadkill's the closest thing you get.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like a wonderful offer that you're putting before me, but have you really thought about the options that are available to us around here? There's not a lot. I know you think you're doing something good for me, but, on balance, I'm not sure it is.
Yeah. I don't think one meal a day is worth it.
I don't think anything's worth this, frankly. Anyway.
Correct. It's a good point.
So, and again, he's raping her daily. Now, I forgot to mention, but Lynn said in an article I read that there was one point where he left her with, it was a hot dog or just a piece of food and a glass of water for 2 weeks while they went on holiday.
What?
It's extraordinary these women survived. So, and also not to mention the health hazards of living in a mouldy, dank, just not getting pneumonia is extraordinary. Jennifer, as I said, mother of 2, family reports her missing straight away. There was a big hunt for her. They had helicopters and everything, but there was no leads. There was no way to find her. No one thought she was a runaway, but she definitely had disappeared. Now, she was only in the dungeon for 2 months. And in that time, he told her he was going to sell her for $30,000 on the internet and that he was working for a ring of high-profile people, including the police or some sort of CIA. Similar stories telling the others. He made her read the Bible to him, which was quite odd. Apparently from the beginning to the end, like no specific readings, just beginning to end. On occasion, when she didn't do the right thing, he burned her with a cigarette. And it was on one of these burns that probably got her out of there. She thinks it was anyway, because he burnt her on the back and it became so infected that she's like, I couldn't move. I couldn't get off the bed. I was so sick. This was in an interview with Larry King in 2004. Basically, he was surmising that he didn't want her to die in there. So, because then he'd be like, fuck it,
mess
deal with that. Yeah. So anyway, he came in one day and said, off you fuck. Well, he said, you're going home, which she thought meant he was going to kill her. But no, he dropped her off at her mother's house in the same blindfold scenario as the previous 3 victims. On his own, not with the son. The son only dropped Kirsten the first time, thinking it was some surprise trip to Nevada. What were you going to say?
It was just that for him, the option of her dying in the bunker or getting very sick was a problem for him I mean, it was hidden. No one was going to find it there because no one was going in there.
Yeah, but
then
he
he
couldn't
couldn't
have to clean it out because
he wouldn't have to bring a new person in there. Exactly. So I might have to move her on so it doesn't become a problem down the track.
Because he literally didn't seem to have an interest in killing them. It wasn't about that. It was, and so her dying, yes, would have been terribly inconvenient for him, but he wasn't setting out to cause her to die. So he drops her off at the mother's, as I said. So she went straight to the police, and I'm pretty sure it was with her that because he hadn't actually raped her for several days prior to the lead up of her going home, there was no physical evidence. So they did a rape test, but there was no evidence that suggested she'd been raped. And while she gave descriptions of the words painted on the walls of the bunker, which said wall of thugs and had peace signs, and I think some of the victims had scrawled their names on the walls and that sort of stuff. So she told them about that, and she told them that he picked her up in a tan 1975 Mercury Comet. And so I'm going to say it probably was a 1974, and I've been saying it wrong the whole time. And that's the reason that's significant is because they did a search on all the owners of the make, model, and year. And when they only got one hit and it was disproved as being even remotely could be anything to do with this case, they gave it up.
Oh, how ridiculous.
What?
I wouldn't know what year any car was from. Do you know what I mean?
Well, she'd seen some kind of registration plate or sticker or something that she thought said it was a 1974 Mercury Comet. Let's account for the trauma and whatever that she's gone through, and she's been there for 2 months and she's been burned by a cigarette and she's had a blood infection probably. But instead of accounting for the fact that the Mercury Comet was made between 71 and 77, so actually if they'd run a check on all 10 Mercury Comets in that area from 71 to 77, they would have had a much larger pool of possible suspects.
Jesus, what is it? Defective detective. That sounds a bit weak.
Somewhat tragically, the detective, whose name is Detective Schmidt, no relation, did drive around the city with her to see if they could see anything familiar, but nothing came up. And he's like, I drove her around for hours and hours at night, we couldn't get anything. It's like, well, why? While you were doing that, could someone have been checking all the other fucking Mercury Comets?
How crazy.
I mean, also, if there's only one from 1974, chances are from 71 to 77. You're
one
not
from
going to
75
get
in that area.
thousands.
Correct.
Like, even if it's 30, that's not hard.
No. And look, she says, I think I saw a rego plate. It's a 1974 Mercury Comet. But she's not Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny, right? She's not been brought in as the fucking vehicle expert. You might say there's a margin for error on any one of those. It might not be a Mercury Comet. It might be a Mercury Monarch. It might be something else. I wouldn't know what a fucking car looks like, to your point, Swanee.
No, I don't have a clue.
The number of times I see a Mercedes convertible and think it's a Cascada because the styling's similar. And then I think, oh, no, that's the upmarket version of my car. I believe Detective Schmidt didn't actually really believe her.
Yeah, me too.
She does say at some point in one of these interviews that they basically got to a point and said, we think you're making this up. This is very Silence of the Lambs. We don't think this really happened. And remember, this is now in 2001, so Silence of the Lambs was out by this time, even though he's been doing this since 88. So John's out there again cruising around in his 1974 Mercury Comet, which apparently had been checked by police 70 times by then because they kept seeing this weirdo driving around the streets at night, but I guess there was nothing on him and no one saw him break a law. And the women he took all got into the car willingly. So there's no screaming, there's no, there's no alarm raised. People aren't seeing a kerfuffle and saying this man grabbed her off the street. The women have all got in of their own volition. So finally, we come to his last victim. Now, he called her, I'm going to say Mika. I don't know how to say it. Meikka, Mika. In October 2002, he picked up a young girl and offered her a way to make money. She's 16, this one. Not long after she was in the dungeon, because let's face it, we all know what happens when you get picked up naked and chained, he told her that he'd set wild dogs on her to kill her if she tried to get away.
Oh.
And he also raped her the first day she was there, which was noted like something different. So maybe he just got them in, and then he came back to them later and raped them a day or so later. But on this occasion,
he's got like a program. He's got like an introductory kind of couple of sessions. He runs them through the first couple of days. Yeah. By the time we get to day 2 or 3, we'll be looking at doing some practical work. But just to let you know, this is what I've got in mind.
Do you not recall your
Are you
friend,
still
the
signed
old
up for it?
toolbox guy, who did exactly that? Remember, he had tapes. He would play a tape to them to tell them what was going to happen to them. The toolbox killer.
Oh God.
Yes.
This guy, as far as I know, he certainly raped them, and I'm going to say he raped them in all the ways that you could be raped. But I don't think he used sadomasochistic tools and stuff like the toolbox guy.
Mhm.
They certainly never mentioned it if in anything I read. Anyway, so he rapes her, and then he does the same thing, spins the story like the others where he's part of some sex slave ring. And then also he tells her that other people were wanting to come and rape her too. Unlike the other victims, though, Mika managed to become close to him. And some people suggest it was Stockholm syndrome, but I think my understanding of Stockholm syndrome is where the victim forms an association and feelings for the rapist or the kidnapper, whatever. I'm not sure in this that she didn't just try to make life a bit easier for herself, a bit like Lynn, the Vietnamese lady. For whatever reason, he softens quite a lot to her, and he allows her to access the house. She was allowed to use the proper bathroom, although he had barred all the windows. And apparently I read that the bars on the windows were actually, refrigerator trays. In your fridge you've got the thing. He just turned them around that way and screwed them in. So she probably could have got out if she tried, but she wasn't to know that. But tight ass, right? He's been going through people's skips, I reckon, and getting that shit out. Yeah, exactly. But he boarded the window up in the bathroom and that sort of, and so it was, he made it, she couldn't leave, basically. So she was in the house, but she wasn't, like Ariel Castro, actually. He kept his victims in the house. And he was still sexually abusing her. Raping constantly. So by April 2003, such was the relationship between them that John took her to the shops, and he even took her bowling one time.
Oh.
It's sort of weirdly not like they were dating, because they weren't dating, but it sort of moves into this sort of madness in his head, I think, that I can't remember what he said. He said something about, just really enjoying each other's company or something. I can't remember. It was something like that anyway. He wouldn't let her out of his sight, of course, because he still knew that he was her captor. And I think, though, in these occasions that she didn't try to run away or signal to anyone that she was in trouble, he relaxed a bit. And I think by this time he starts to believe that she wants to be with him. But I would say Mika was the master of the long con. So he takes her out to a karaoke night at a pub, and Mika gets up, signs herself up, gets up, sings a few tunes for the patrons. John's standing on the stage with her, right next to her, and people are going, well, they weren't a couple, and they weren't father-daughter. She's a person of colour, so obviously, and he's white he looks sort of Germanic. So they know that they're not related, and it's just a bit weird. But she doesn't, while she's got a microphone in her hand, say, "This man has abducted and raped me for the last however long.
I need
Help,
somebody.
need somebody. Help!" Yeah, not just anybody. Get the police. Yeah, she doesn't say anything. And there was a bit of carry on about that later to say, why didn't she call it out? But could you imagine if you're in that situation and you're in a karaoke bar and someone says, "Just to let you know, the man standing next to me has been raping me and he's abducted me. My name is blah blah."
Everyone would just
Whether
laugh.
or not, yeah,
It's
I'm
a
not
long
sure
shot.
that's.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
Yeah, I'm just not sure it's the right forum for it. So she doesn't say anything, and they did say that it all looked a bit weird, but he didn't look. No one would have guessed that she was his prisoner because she didn't make a sound. She didn't look terrified, and he was just sort of that weird old guy standing next to her. 5 days later, though, she convinced him to let her use the phone at his favourite place, the bottle and can recycling place. And she said she was going to call a church about their service times because obviously he's slacked off enough that she's like, I want to go to church now. And I'm not sure if he made her read the Bible, but he had this idea about how by taking these women off the streets and turning them into his sex slaves, but I'm not even sure he thought about it like that. It was more like, I'm giving them an opportunity to better themselves and that sort of stuff. So she wants to go to church, and he's like, okay. So he lets her use the phone, but she doesn't call the church. She calls her sister, and she immediately spills everything to the sister, where I am, who this man is, what's been going on. And because, of course, they're not at the house, so she knows the address. She's like, I'm at this recycling plant, whatever it is. And the police arrived toot sweet, and he was arrested.
Oh, good. Finally, some good news.
So then the police go to his house because at this point they're thinking this man could well have picked up and murdered loads of women, right? Loads of girls. So they decide they have to search it.
And I think, that car's ringing a bell.
Yeah,
I can't think why. Just, I don't know.
Yeah, well, they play that down a bit, I can tell you. But they go into the house to start with, and it's like that story you covered about hoarders, Clarkie. It's floor-to-ceiling shit everywhere.
Yeah. Booby-trapped?
Not booby-trapped, but kind of thing like they said if you moved one thing, you knew like piles of stuff would fall on you and, so they were like, it's not like we've never seen anything like it. And it's typical to hoarder, stacks of magazines, stacks of newspapers, stacks of broken appliances, food wrappers.
Pizza boxes.
Probably dead cats somewhere under there too. And bottles and bottles. But they're actually not there. They haven't got a warrant at this point. No, they must have had. They arrested him on suspicion. But they basically are still trying to confirm what they're looking at.
How many victims?
Did this woman make this up?
Wolf Crier.
It's, as I said, a shithole. And some things are organised and some aren't. And they found 13,000 bottles along with loads of other shit.
I'm surprised he hadn't taken them in.
Well, apparently he had them. It was something about they were Canadian. I don't think he could have. I think that's the problem. They were Canadian bottles.
You had to take them across the border.
Yeah, and so he meticulously stacked these, and he had like all the cores in one bit, and then he had all the Bud Lights, and then he had all the whatever the other brand is.
13,000 bottles.
Bottles stacked against the wall. Absolutely, right? As you say, I think maybe some point he thought, that'll be great. It's a great cache. I'm going to take it all up to Canada and be even richer than I am. Eventually, sifting through this maze, they find the dungeon. And the writing on the wall as Detective Schmidt goes through the steel door, he opens it up and he crawls through this disgusting space and he opens it up and he gets his little flashlight, very Mulder and Scully-esque, and he sees the words on the wall directly across from him and it says, Wall of Thugs.
Mm-hmm.
Precisely what Jennifer had told him was written on the wall. And he knows at that point they have now found the location of where, well, suddenly now he believes Jennifer and he has found the location of her imprisonment. I know, not all Schmidts are as good as me. So they do look for other bodies and they brought in, you know those things that they like, I think they're called not seismic, but they basically run it over the land to see whether or not there's been any disturbances which would indicate that there might be shallow graves or bodies that have been buried there. And they go, because it's quite a big piece of land. I looked it up on realestate.com US and the address, and it's over half an acre. So, and that's after he subdivided it. So they look around and they don't find anything. They had to go through 67 years of crap because that's how old he was at this point, and he'd pretty much never thrown anything out. The dungeon was truly disgusting. It was mouldy and damp and dark and awful, and Detective Schmidt described it as being like a medieval dungeon.
Oh, medieval.
It's a medieval dungeon.
Medieval.
From John's point of view, though, as I said, he's helping these ladies. He didn't seem to consider his actions bad at all. And he kind of figured, like he was so smug about this, that he thought he was just going to get community service or something. He really didn't think he was going to get severely convicted for this. He just didn't see that he was doing anything wrong at all.
Man, what a clueless fuck.
Yeah, and I think so they would have known, they knew about Jennifer. They may have made the connection to Lynn because she did go to the police. And of course there was this story. So, but I think when the story broke, Kirsten and Michelle, the other two victims, came forward and said, yeah, that actually happened to me too. So they all gave witness statements to avoid having to go to court. So this was a plea deal that was struck, and it was in part because that's what his defence attorneys were looking for, but it was also in part to save them the horror of having to face this appalling person. And he was then sentenced to 18 years to life in 2003. For me, the term does sound lenient. I heard Jennifer saying she thought it was okay. They seemed to be okay with it, but they were okay with it on the basis that they didn't have to see him again and they knew he was put away. And he also had all of his assets seized and divvied up to go into a trust fund for his victims. And at the time, they worked out he was worth about $1 million. So he was up for parole in 2021 and it was denied. And he was up for parole again last year in 2023 and that was also denied. Boo-hoo. Some people have remarked on the fact that he's 89 and he's not going to hurt anyone now, but over 15 years, he took so much from these 5 women that I would never parole him either. The other thing is, in his statements to the parole board, he said things like, I just want to correct that the first victim I took was 14, not 13, because I don't want you, thinking that I took a 13-year-old. Not that it really matters, but at the end of the day, she was actually 14. So I don't want you.
That's right. Truth
Well,
stretches.
I just don't want you to, inappropriately or unfairly.
I don't like what you're insinuating there. Yeah.
I don't want you to your decision making to be unfairly biased by the fact that some sources had reported she was 13, she was 14. There was a couple of these sorts of statements that make you think you're not fucking sorry at all. At his trial, he made out that he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did these terrible things," but he wasn't. He's clueless, and he's 20 cents short of $1. I'm going to have to say. So yes, he's still locked up now. Now I do want to finish this story with a bit of an aside, and it's to do with this. So the victims, Jennifer and Kirsten, appeared, as I said, on Larry King Live back in 2004. I couldn't see that interview because the footage isn't available.
Yeah.
But I read a transcript of it, and I would like to think that I read a tone into it that might not have been there if I'd actually listened to it. And I know it was 20 years ago that this interview was taken, but in some ways it upset me more than aspects of this case. And also
I heard what was asked of her.
I'll get to it. I also heard Jennifer talking on a YouTube clip of WIBX First News with Keela in the morning from 2015. And in both of these interviews, the insensitive handling of both, it was just disgusting. King asked her why she didn't try to get out. Both of them. Why'd you get in the car? Were you drinking? Were you on drugs? And how did he get you into the house? And where were you? And what also shit me to tears was when they asked, both of them asked questions. That this was in the media, right, from 2003, these stories. Just your researcher could have told him this was the series of events that led to these women being in this situation. Anyone could have said, Kirsten was in this situation first, then he released her, and then 3 victims later, Jennifer comes along. Larry King's going, so could you hear the other women? Could you, when did he come in? And she's like, he wasn't up. There wasn't an upstairs. I was in a bunker, right? I never heard anything. I never saw anything. So you were just there? Yes, I was just there. Oh, right. Did you hear the other women? Did you all use the bath? I might make that one up, right? And they're like, but there was no other woman there at the same time. Like, that's a fucking easy fact to have known and to have understood before you start. And then it gets worse. Larry King has fucking general public people ring up and ask questions.
God.
Through the interview, a couple of times he played tapes because John Jamelske actually made them make audio tapes. I don't think he videoed sex tapes or anything. Oh, no, he did. He made sex tapes with one of them.
The first one, I think you said.
I can't remember.
She had to record.
No, she was recording audio tapes for a family and she had to write everything down. But there was one who I think he made, might have been Mika actually. I think he made sex videos with her. And when I say sex videos, he raped her and filmed that and thought it was a sex tape. So, but it wasn't, we weren't talking about that. We were talking, this was about Kirsten and Jennifer, and they played a bit of footage, and it was, I think it was Kirsten talking to him on an audio tape. And in the audio tape, he doesn't sound like he's doing anything. Like they didn't repeat it, right? So I don't know what was on it. But judging by the questions that then came next, it was probably a bit of a banal conversation between her and him. Anyway, this person rings up and says, well, you've said that he was really cruel and did terrible things to you. So how do you feel about it when, you hear that tape and he's not actually doing anything to you? You're not being tortured? Oh, what? And this poor girl who, as I said, kept saying, I don't really have a great deal of memory of it because she's blanked it out. They also had a psychologist on the same interview who says, well, she's probably not going to remember it because she's got PTSD, and she'd only just, and that was a year after he'd been arrested, right? So she was taken in 1988. So this is 2004. She'd only just started to get counselling at that point to deal with this. They had received no support from anyone, these victims. They hadn't been given any counselling, and they're on fucking Larry King, and he's asking just foul line of questioning. So to quote another man who I think is foul in the media, and I think we all know who he is, shame, shame, shame. That's my case.
Well done. Very interesting.
Amazing.
Thoughts on sentencing? I think it's pretty evident what we need to do with him. Now I'm going to send him to James Gum's dungeon.
With a big bottle of lotion.
It puts the lotion on.
Or else it gets the hose again.
again. Yeah. These poor girls, could you imagine it? Freezing cold. As I said, he pumped a bit of heat in from the house and they're bathing. I mean, just from my own personal hygiene perspective, he's raping them daily and they only bathe every couple of weeks. This is my point. This is how vile this situation is. And then when sorry, that was one of the other things. Sorry, in his parole board paper, response, he said, well, I wasn't mean to them. I gave them bubble baths sometimes.
Oh, no worries, mate.
It's
so weird. I find it. It's very sounds unusual. More like a movie than real life.
The reality, yeah. It's very unusual.
His disconnectedness from it is kind of mind blowing. How do you do that and then say things like that?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. What? The other thing that I didn't make a point of was they all came from different backgrounds, right. And various other people have made a fuss about that. I don't think it's relevant. I think he just picked people who were vulnerable at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was opportunistic, I think.
Available, vulnerable.
Desirable.
Yes. It's hard. I find it difficult to sentence these people who just seem to be kind of clueless. They're operating under their own system of morals or, own sort of moral code. And it doesn't even, it's not like it's all this or all that. It's all over the shop for different parts. So it's like, I don't really know where their head's at any given point. It's bizarre that they think that they're helping and yet they're raping someone and they know they're keeping them away from, and they're clever enough at different points to get them to send a letter. Do you know what I mean? There's stuff that just doesn't, when it doesn't add up, I find it really hard to give them a sentence because what am I working to? I don't think
he saw it as rape. I think he thought he had a right to have sex with these women.
Mm.
And in his mind, it was having sex, I think. It wasn't about them. It was about him.
Not about
he didn't
power.
Care. Well, I mean, a lot of it was about power, mainly because they were all locked up, and he was quite cruel to them. He was psychologically cruel with all of that brainwashing.
The sex, that kind of power.
No, I think he was just wanted to have sex.
Thing, or was it? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it?
I don't
think. For sex?
In fairness, it's hard to say because none of the women have talked about it, which is fair enough too. So that is left a bit to your imagination as to. But I shouldn't. If you resisted, he would be violent, I think. And they pretty much said that. And he'd belt them too. Like if they resisted or didn't
It wasn't like he didn't do anything to them. Yeah, there was lots of things he did.
He would belt them up.
Definitely.
He definitely smacked one for crying, by the way, too. She wasn't actually not doing what she was told. She was just upset he didn't want to see it. And she said something like, I'll never cry in front of him again. What a fucking monster.
It's next level cruelty.
I don't know what I'm finding to try and punish within him. Do you know what I mean? Because he's just all over the shop.
But it's almost like if you had the means to, and I'm not talking lobotomy before you go there, Clarky, but if you had the means to rewire his brain so that he could
see the damage he'd done.
Yeah, put everything into the kind of way of seeing the world that you or I or other people have with our fairly standardized moral code and recognize the awful thing that he has done.
The horror of it.
And experience the remorse, because I don't think he experiences any remorse right now. But yeah, like to have some kind of rewiring to go, oh my God, I'm an absolute monster.
But I'm not too bad. I'm going to pop her on a plane. Let's go to Tahoe they go to Tahoe in Vegas. That's the stuff where I go, I don't know what to do with that bit. And I go, okay, there's things that would follow patterns that I think, I'd expect that to happen if someone's going to kidnap a woman.
That was sort of my
as a prisoner. I understand that.
My horrific leads about strangled her, left her in the desert, or killed her, chopped her up, and put her in acid. Like there is where you expected this. You expected this story to go there.
Yeah.
Almost each time, even to
being
the
dropped
last,
off at home,
even to the last victim. You're thinking, oh God! But they all,
he's a nutjob.
They all were just she got out, but the others were all released, and he would have continued to just pick women up and do that. I think
I do too.
It's not to say that he wouldn't have killed a woman accidentally or otherwise going forward, but there wasn't any suggestion that his behaviour was escalating. His violence was escalating. So weird.
I agree with that. It just seems to it was like, well, if it ain't broke, he just was able to continue to do the same thing. No one had dobbed him in when he'd said to them, all the little things that he'd use, that clever enough to say, I'm part of a trafficking ring. I'm part of the CIA. I'm part of the police. I'm part of something bigger. So if you try and tell anybody, what's the point? You are done, and so are your family. So if you want a life on the outside, just go quietly into the dark, into the night, whatever else. Go back to your family and zoom.
And it didn't work for all of them, though. If the police had actually...
Yes, that's true.
But there wasn't... I mean, the car is the big one, right? The car is where they let...
So.
Yeah.
The defective detecting happens around that car.
Mm-hmm.
They had an opportunity at that point after Jennifer was... So the last victim wouldn't have been a victim if they had just followed that bit down a little bit further to 1974 or 1976, like either side of the year she thought it was. Sorry. Yeah, she thought it was a 75. It was a 74.
I almost feel like if it was a movie I was watching, I'd probably go, as if. And I don't mean that in any disrespect to the victims, but how can you keep doing that and getting away with it and doing the same thing for years? Like it just... And then, like Swanee, like you were saying, then take them to Vegas
Tahoe,
or whatever it was. Yeah, like, what? I'll just drop them off at their mum's house.
Yeah.
No one's going to see anything
But see,
weird.
even that was threatening because...
And then driving past.
Oh, I get it, but...
The girls were interesting because the girls were sort of like, how does he know where we are? How does he know our families? They're all pretty much in the same area. I think one of the victims actually only lived... like maybe not on the same street, but was very close to where he was. But also you would imagine that they would have had some kind of ID in their wallets when he took them. So there must be some way for him to have worked out who they were. He could have easily said, okay, I kind of know who the family are. It wouldn't have been hard. I don't think it would have been hard for him to identify the families. But the girls all seemed surprised by how he was able to do that. I'm not.
I'm baffled. I really don't know what to suggest.
Glass rod, glass rod, glass rod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, that crossed my mind.
He needs to be kept away, that's for sure. Because nothing seems to make sense within the way he operates. So even being punished it's just keeping him out of everybody else's way. Well, I think
given the parallels with Silence of the Lambs, maybe we put him in the jail that Hannibal Lecter and the guy next door... Migs were in, where he's got a big perspex, which looks like a dungeon, but just with a big perspex wall, and he can't get at anyone ever again. But he also has pretty uncomfortable lodgings. Maybe he gets to have a mouldy.
Oh, it has to be filthy
mattress.
And unhygienic and whatever else. It can be I'm
not sure that would bother him though.
I mean
honestly,
cleanliness.
The hoarder house.
Well, he's having sex on dirty foam mattresses by choice, not like the poor women who are.
Mattress.
Raped on them.
Same mattress for 15 years.
Ew.
Yes. Maybe that's
he probably turned it though.
He needs a Buddha enlightenment moment, like you were saying, where he actually gets to realise the horrors.
And then punish him. Because then he'll understand what he's being punished for.
Then get the glass rod out.
Oh, I'm crossing my legs just at the thought, and I don't even have a penis. All right. Well, on that note, thanks for listening to that one. And as we say every week, miss you already.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine. Or visit our website, www.trialbywine.com, to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.